Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Foley.
Here.
Councilmember Fremont.
Here.
Councilmember Bastian. Vice Mayor Philbin.
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. We have a quorum, and with 4 items on the agenda, we just knocked out 3 of them. I think item 4 will take a little bit longer. Discussion fiscal year 22-23 operating fund budgets, capital outlay, and capital improvement programs. And I can tell because I'm blurry-eyed from reading it all. Wayne, tell us what we're going to be doing this evening.
Yes, sir. Finance Director John McKinney will be providing a presentation for you going over a variety of items related to the budget, expenses, revenue sources, capital outlay. We'll look to get some direction from you on various areas so that we can move forward with setting the maximum millage next Tuesday night at your regular meeting. With that, unless you have other questions for me, I'll have John come up and do the presentation.
All right. Now, I'm not going to question anything because I know John's, based on how thick this was when I printed it out originally, and he's made changes since then, I know he's got a lot to talk about.
Mayor, could you turn your mic on, please?
There we go. Thanks, Rob.
Mayor, Council, good
Good
evening.
shirt.
Go Knights.
Sorry, John.
So a couple of things. First, I want to say that, as we go through this budget process, a new finance team, et cetera. So, like the CIP books, I apologize for those being late, just something I wasn't aware of. So hopefully all have those now. I want to thank Linda, Sigrid, and Robin, and all the other staff of finance that have helped put this together. As everyone knows, I have, a colleague of mine back here that, the budget process is very fluid. So, we must have changed this budget presentation 30 times since we started it. So, and it will continue to change the budget document until the day that you as council approve the final millage and final budget September 21st. And there'll be changes throughout the year. The second thing is I want to apologize, Mayor, is that I know you like 30 slides or less. I'm at 34, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, but it's only 5:30. It's not 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So
Very true. So this evening, as you know, this is just kind of wrapping everything up. We've had several budget workshops since May. Your staff has had workshops going all the way back to February. So this is just kind of wrapping everything up. So as the city manager said, next week you will be passing a maximum millage, and as stated previously, we'll be providing a proposed budget document to you no later than August 12th. So we're going to highlight the key drivers. I put together a couple of slides regarding comparisons of our sister cities, DeLand, New Smyrna, Daytona, and Ormond Beach. We're going to go over the fund reviews, show you what we have to date. Investment in capital, what you've, so far we've discussed on capital outlay, fleet replacement, your capital improvement program. We're also within there, we're going to highlight very briefly the fact that we've been talking about some new debt issuance. And next week we have your financial advisor and underwriter will actually be presenting to you potentials on how we would go about issuing any new debt. So as it stands right now, the citywide total budget is $159,781,716. At this point in time, the general fund is balanced at $47,997,012 at an operating millage rate of 4.92. You have one outstanding general obligation bond, so based on taxable value, the required millage rate is 0.21. We're gonna, your CIP book that you received a week ago, it has, your capital outlay, your fleet replacement, and your capital improvement budgets. So we won't go over that too much this evening, but that's capital outlay is 4.1 million, and your capital improvement projects are 31 million. At the current time, between your governmental and enterprise funds, we have just under $38 million in outstanding debt. And this budget that we're presenting to you over the next couple of weeks has a required debt issuance of $21,160,000. So some of our key drivers in putting together this budget, I know we've gone over this every last workshop, but the police has a contractual increase in next year's budget of 5%. Fire has an average of 3.5%. NAGE and civil service are still in negotiation, so that's to be determined. We're looking at increases from Florida Healthcare of 10%. Property and casualty, we're estimating up to 25%. And as we've gone over and over, all of this is kind of what's leading our inflation. The last CPI release was still at 9.1, 2 months in a row. So if we go all the way back to the first budget workshop that I did with your directors and budget staff, when we were looking at this, that CPI increase was over 7% back in February. So the departments were tasked with bringing together operational costs not exceeding 3.5% across the board. I can tell you every last department, whether it's general fund or enterprise funds, have all held to that 3.5% increase. That was to cover things for fuel, contracted maintenance, all the chemical increases, everything that we have received from our outside vendors, we kept at 3.5% or less. Also, it's going into this budget as we prepare it. We have our phase 1 fee study where we're looking at water, wastewater, building, cost allocation, and impact fees. And part of phase 2, which would go into the 23-24 budget, would be the stormwater potential fees. So sitting back, kind of, the next few slides, I'm not going to go over these too much, but I just wanted to provide to you some city comparisons. Where, on this slide, it kind of tells you what the average home value is across, our 5 subject cities. All of this information came right from Zillow. I've included what our population is. I've wanted to make sure that I highlighted, the homesteaded versus non-homesteaded properties and non-residentials. One thing to note is just when you look at, Daytona Beach, Daytona Beach only has 35% of their residential properties are homesteaded. All of their other properties are non-homesteaded. So that goes, second homes, rental property, all of that. So you can see that Port Orange leads these, comparison cities in terms of homesteaded properties. And then the final item I wanted to point out on this is if you look at Daytona Beach, just look at all their non-residential. That's the Tanger, that's the mall. Those are all those, properties that, they bring in, quite a bit of taxable value for, in some cases, very little use of our city services. And just from sheer numbers, look at the total parcel count. So you can see that, by far Daytona Beach, leads, the comparisons, and we're, behind them, but we're behind them by almost 9,000 parcels.
John, just a quick comment before you leave that slide. It's
Yes,
also
sir.
important to keep in mind that Daytona, Ormond, and New Smyrna have a tremendous amount of coastal properties, beachside properties as well, and on both sides of the intercoastal that Port Orange doesn't have. I mean, we've got a very extremely small portion comparatively to the rest of those cities. So when you look at the average home values, the stuff that they've got, like I've seen some of the homes that are not coastal but on the beach side in New Smyrna, and it is absolutely crazy what those homes sell for. I mean, good for them, but completely different than what we see in our city.
So, for all of us in this room that have, a house that's homesteaded, we're limited by state statute to 3% increase. Non-homesteaded property is limited to 10%. But if you sell the home, do a massive renovation, that, the property appraiser can go in and reassess the property. It's a no holds barred. It can go from $200,000 property value last year to $500,000 this year. So you just don't know. And a lot of that is, like you said, is being led by the New Smyrna entire coastal, no matter what municipality or unincorporated you're in. So the other thing I just wanted to put in here is, this is our taxable value. I mean, this just goes to show you that, of all the 5 cities, Daytona Beach carries 29% of the taxable value. The City of Port Orange is only 18%. So this just right here shows, you know, where and who is leading the taxable value. Again, this just goes to reiterate property types. Everything that you see in blue is homesteaded, orange is non-homesteaded, gray is non-residential, and the yellow is other. So, you know, just between the non-homesteaded and the non-residential, you can clearly see that Daytona Beach and New Smyrna Beach both kind of lead the charge in those areas. General fund comparison, you know, that's something that's, you know, asked constantly. Well, you know, where does Port Orange compare to another city? Again, I've said up here several times, you really can't compare. Every city spends their money in a different manner. One thing I can tell you, every city on here, 50% or more of their general fund budget is in public safety. You can see, you know, if you go in and, you know, just look at Daytona, just look at where Daytona is and the, you know, the population it serves. They have a lot more human service needs, or, you know, they have, you know, the municipal stadium. They just have a lot of other areas that just have, you know, a bigger need from the general fund. This was another one, and again, everything I'm sharing with you is as of 9/30/21, right out of the annual comprehensive financial reports. So this is just the spend per capita. So you can, you know, this will clearly show you what Daytona Beach spends per person versus
This
Port
is a
Orange.
slide I couldn't wait for you to get to, because this is the efficiency measure that I'm pretty proud of for all of us, right here. What we spend per person, what we get, compared to, you know, I even consider Daytona an outlier, but considering what we spend compared to Ormond, New Smyrna, and even DeLand per person, and what we're able to give our citizens, this is an incredible efficiency measure. I was glad you put this in here.
Welcome. You know, so this has many different stories. You can interpret all of these slides in many different ways. It's just all data, and it's available to everyone out there with a computer. I won't go back over this, but, you know, this includes all of our, you know, general fund, special revenues, capital projects, debt service, enterprise, internal service. This is all of our funds that you're responsible for, that you charge me to do. As we've stated to you over the last few months, we've done a lot of cleanup, reducing funds, consolidating funds. So we're still on that kick to, you know, as the mayor says and the city manager, you know, efficiency and traditional budget. So our revenues, so pretty much for the this slide, the takeaway from this is that, you know, we're currently at 4.9072 with our rollback. The budget that I've presented to you through the city manager is with a millage rate of 4.92. That's the biggest increase on the taxes or ad valorem that you're seeing there. We're bringing in more ad valorem proceeds. The state has also brought in, you know, additional intergovernmental revenues from all of our shared revenue sources. Everything else on here is relatively flat or reduced, as you can see. I did add into there to show what your prior year taxable value, your increase from prior year, including new construction, which gives us our estimated 2022 taxable value of that $4.5 billion. So we are still, you know, from the last few years, we're still on that positive trend. I can't predict where we'll be in 6 months, or a year or 3 years from now, but I can only go based on the data that's been provided to me from the county moving forward. Again, your FA will be discussing market situations, et cetera, in a lot more detail. They're prepared to bring that to you next week.
John, that bottom where it says estimated 22, is that supposed to be 2022 values, or is that supposed to be estimated for 2023?
No, that's
That's right.
yeah.
It's 22. Okay.
Yep, that's based
Gotcha.
off of what it was in place
Yep.
December 31st of 21
Got it.
for our 22 value.
Okay. Perfect.
You're always a year in a row.
That's right. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Y'all had asked me back in May provide information regarding the transport our services. So So I can tell you since the program inception in 2018, we've provided a little over 5,000 transports, bringing in $1.5 million in revenue. We only went to 24/7 service January 1st of this year. So speaking with the chief, the county, everything, looking at what we estimate to transports to do next year, I can conservatively estimate we'll do 2,500 transports next year, bringing in a little over $761,000 in revenue. And to answer your question, you asked me in May, can it support a lease for a new transport unit? The answer is yes. So that's an all-in. That's salary and benefits for the 6 firefighter paramedics. That's fuel, maintenance, supplies, and the capital lease based on the current estimated interest rate of 3%. So it can definitely cover it, and we estimate a little bit more, but again, I try to err on the side of caution. That's my conservative number.
Can you hold right there for just one quick second?
Yes, sir.
Wayne, if you would, I'd like for you and the fire chief to touch, not at the end of the presentation, but, so the only thing I want to make note of here is that I believe it was 2019, there was some discussion at the county level when they finished their assessment that they felt as though they needed to add about 12 to 14 new fully staffed transport units. My recollection is that never happened. So us continuing to do this and make projections on what we think will happen, I think there is a factor. And what I'm curious is does the county have anything in this year's budget? I have asked, by the way, from the county, and I haven't got the answer yet, but I want to know, does the county have anything that would change this? In other words, if they've got in their budget to add 10 new ambulances and 25 new paramedics to improve responses and service countywide, and there's going to be more evac units in Port Orange, knowing that now we're closest response, how is that going to impact it? If they don't have that in their budget, then clearly we know how it's going to impact. So not to answer right now, just to have on your mind when John's done, that we can have that conversation. Thanks, John.
Okay. So as we now dive into the general fund expenditures, I just want to point out that within the general fund, 67% of the entire general fund is personnel, salary, and benefits. Something else to take into consideration is that when you look at your within here, we have transfers that the city pays through the cost allocation for information technology, vehicle maintenance, etc. So in some municipalities, those cost centers, divisions might be within the general fund. So just know that on top of this, the general fund is also paying into internal service funds for additional staff salary and benefits. But again, other than contractual increases within personnel, every last one of your general fund divisions all held at 3.5% or less on their increases. No one brought, there is no, within this budget, there's no enhancements, there's no new positions, etc. In fact, and again, just kind of reiterating the personnel, within the general fund, just based on trends, we have 16 positions that have historically gone open due to staff turnover, etc. So in speaking with all the directors, the city manager, and your administrative service director, we all feel comfortable that we can hold these positions as they're a budgeted position. We just have unfunded them, and we will make it throughout the year without a problem. In a perfect world, if either one of your chiefs were able to hire 100% of the staff, then I would be coming back to you at mid-year or year-end for a budget amendment, asking for the use of reserves, or being able to say, hey, finance wound up having some savings, or city clerk, HR, etc., that we can just do a transfer to fund those positions that were able to be filled. But the city manager and I would come back to you with that recommendation.
That would be a very unique but good problem to have.
In all the years, sir, that I've done this, I've had to come back to council one time. So it's like I said, I'm a very conservative individual, and I'm conservative to say we can do it. Here's a reiteration of the cost center. You can see from this, between police and fire, your public safety, they're 58% of your general fund. And if you add into that Parks and Rec, your next biggest department, that's 69%. And then if we add into your public works, streets, well, then that's 79%. So those are the four primary cost drivers of your general fund. And again, just reiterating, every last department held their price on all their contracted services at 3.5%. So the only increase over 3.5% was directly related to salary and benefits. I'm not going into the detail, but if any member of council or the public wants a detailed dive into any one of these cost centers, your finance department can provide that at a minute's notice. We have it ready.
In that case, I'll make one request.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see the salary breakdown.
By department or overall?
Individual.
Gotcha, will do.
Okay.
Okay,
And when I say me, it's everybody.
understood.
Thanks.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna make a quick ask right now. I was gonna hold off onto the end, but since it's been, if that's all right. let's
He
go
asked for
through it.
asking.
There she is.
Because it's been said several times, departments held to a 3.5% increase. How come we didn't ask them to hold a 0? And the reason I ask is, you know, and it may not have been done, but, you know, households and businesses all over the country are having to do exactly that, and cutbacks. Why would we not ask that of our departments? And that might be a question
Yeah.
for the manager, you
It
know,
is.
in all fairness.
Some households and businesses are, I would say most are not. Most of them are probably shrinking their products and selling them for more money. These departments had operating cost of gas, we had supplies, we had chemicals, these are things that are gonna cost us more money, so I didn't feel like there was a way to start with 0. So we asked them to stay a third of the total inflationary cost. So they were able to pick up some of the inflationary costs without picking up all of them. So we thought at least at some portion of an increased cost was a fair thing to ask.
Just for argument purposes and not to create debate, excuse me, just for, you know, because I know we talk a lot about, you know, we don't want to cut services and things of that nature, but I don't know what that means, because we've never put departments in a position to say, what can we do? If we say, listen, you know, I hear your point that not all houses, but a whole heck of a lot of houses and businesses are having to do exactly that, my house including. So why would we not, you know, at least put them in position, hey, here's, and if they can't, they can't, but.
Businesses
until-
aren't doing that.
Excuse me?
Businesses aren't doing that.
Businesses are not having to cut back?
No, they're passing it on to us. That's
Businesses-
why the inflation.
And they're not having to cut back to stay open as well?
They're raising
That's
prices,
exactly what's happening.
which is,
So-
and we are a business, so we,
And I'm asking a question.
yeah, and I'm
I'm asking
adding
a
to-
question to the manager.
So I
And
apologize
after
if
Wayne answers, I'm going to, you've engaged in debate whether you wanted to or not, but
if I misread the council. Our thought process, I know I can't make gas cost less and I can't make these things we have cost less, so it would be unfair to bring to you something that I can't make happen without a service cut and absent direction from council on service cuts. I wanted to make sure you had a fair, you know, I just think that when we buy tires and bullets and vests and uniforms and all the equipment, the spark plugs, everything we do to run the city, those are going to cost more money. And so it was a fairly conservative estimate at a third of what inflation has been. Absent any direction on a specific reduction in service in any area, which is really a personnel-based thing, I don't think I could have brought you something and done that without some kind of service cut. It wasn't going to come from, I can't make spark plugs less money. I would have to just have need for less of them, have less people doing less things. And so if there's direction from council on service reductions, we will find a way to get you there. But we just didn't have that direction at the time, so I thought it was the better approach to give you what we thought it would cost.
And listen, that's a fair response, and that's, I just wanted to put the question out there to be had, and, you know, and, you know, with respect, you know, that's, I think to assume that businesses around the country and households around the country are not having to cut back services.
well,
are not
households
having to-
absolutely are.
Well, and then that was part of my statement, but to suggest businesses aren't, and businesses aren't shutting down completely, I think is just not the facts that we see.
Well, as long as businesses are socking it to me and price increases, and I'm able to save less money, then we'll have to agree to disagree, because businesses have not kept their prices the same despite their costs, and businesses have not shrunk their offerings for the same price. Businesses, my 28-ounce drink was a 32-ounce drink a few months ago, and I'm getting it for a higher price. So they're passing it along to us. Businesses are passing it along to us. To say they're not is wrong, because they absolutely are. Are they having to make tough decisions? Absolutely, especially small businesses.
And that was part of my question as well, you know, they're cutting services in.
Well, what would you like to cut?
Well, that's the question that I simply proposed to say, what would you do as a department? I'm not making any suggestions right now. The question was asked, where's the challenge? That's simply it.
Okay. And I think the challenge was, how do we keep them at 3.5% when gas costs twice 100% more than it did, and insurance is going through the property insurance 25 to 50% more, health insurance 10% more, wages are certainly going up, and as much as we have the balancing act of making sure that we pay our employees who are struggling with the same things we are, at the same time, what this is all about for all of us is doing that in respect for the people who have to pay for that themselves, and that's the great balancing act. And I think that Wayne's answer was a lot better than the one I was going to give. So
That's all right. Yeah, and listen, that's why we have these debates up here, and I enjoy it.
if there's something we want, no, seriously, in all seriousness, if
Yeah.
there's something that we do that you don't want to do, bring it up. We'll talk about it,
Sure.
and we're not done. So
Yeah, no, and yeah, we'll continue the fun in a little while.
Just a different way of showing the previous slide, just the split between the various divisions, cost centers of the general fund. Now we're moving on to our special revenues. These are all of your, your two CRAs. This is your recreation facility, your YMCA revenues coming in from there, your community development block grant, your police forfeiture trust fund. Again, making sure when we say the police forfeiture trust fund, that's money that's already in the bank that we're planning to use for next year. We're not budgeting new revenue, making sure that I'm very clear on that. We have your recreation impact fee, your recreation scholarship, police education, and your federal police forfeiture trust funds. So these are your special revenue funds. What's not in here, because we don't have anything budgeted so far at the current time, is your grant fund. So as projected revenues come in, you might see other funds come on or go off. So one of the things, just as a side on this, is that your auditor has actually made the recommendation to me that community development block grant should just roll into the grant fund. So again, that's just consolidation. No need to keep all these special revenue funds. Then we go on to the enterprise fund. So the highlight that I want to go on this is, again, Ralph Fatilis is doing some fee studies. The first one up on the is your water wastewater, including your reclaimed irrigation. At this point in time, we're looking at a 5% increase going into next fiscal year, effective October 1st. There's currently still for solid waste an increase built in here of 4.3% and no rate increase planned for fiscal year 2023. In order to complete all of these studies, Ralph Fatilis will be presenting to you August 30th at the next workshop their estimated cost allocation, confirming the methodology used and whether or not it's sufficient to cover the cost, basically reimbursing the general fund. My time, city manager's time, legal's time, everyone that might be a general fund expense but should be charged off to another fund.
John, go back to that one just a second. Enterprise funds, are we talking revenues in those funds or expenses in those
No,
funds?
sir. Well, it's balanced, so this would be revenues and expenditures.
Okay,
So they equal.
all right. Well, of course.
Yep.
But
So-
water and sewer, that's a pretty steep drop in revenue in water and sewer.
Yes,
And
sir.
we haven't done anything with rates. I was just wondering what the methodology is.
Yep. If you'll recall, as Toby and Mark presented to you back in, I can't keep up with all those meetings. When they met up here before, they talked about the amount of debt service that's fallen off on the water sewer fund. So that's what's
that doesn't
driving
have
that.
Gotcha.
That's correct. But on the same token, the monies that's being transferred from water sewer to the water sewer R&R fund. So you can see if you go one line under, that water sewer R&R, that's not only transfers from water sewer, but that's also potential new debt issuance.
Okay.
Okay.
Plus
One
minus
thing that I
between the
do
funds,
want to
gotcha.
point out on this, on the golf course, the general fund does support some of the golf course capital needs. So this not only includes some transfers from the general fund for the golf course, but it also, in order to balance the budget, we had to transfer $9,000 from the general fund to the golf course fund just to balance the budget.
Now, can you go back to the special revenue fund just real quick? I apologize, I should
No
have
worries.
asked that again. So Wayne, our CRA is set to be paid off around Riverwalk. What will that do? That should free up somewhat of a significant amount for the general fund.
The general fund's been paying the debt on that, and it's approximately $250,000 a year. So if we close on Riverwalk next year, it would be the following fiscal year out that savings would show up to the general fund.
So we wouldn't see that until 2024
In the full year,
in the full year.
Yes.
in the full year.
Right.
And we can't count on it until it happens.
That's correct. And again, your bond counsel, Mr. Dame, he reiterated that at that workshop that, to remind council that when that property does sell, then you can reimburse the general fund for all the expenses that they've paid throughout, that debt service.
The last 2 decades of, yeah.
Yep.
And that's roughly $250,000 a year.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So then on the internal service funds, again, these are all funds that are specifically put in place to keep track of things, within the general government of, the city of Port Orange, IT, vehicle maintenance, you have your risk management, lease replacement. So we have the fund that, for, your light duty vehicles, whatnot, for the lease replacement. We have the building maintenance fund. That fund will be, as we close out part of your August 2nd budget amendments, cleans up some of the items in building maintenance, but this fund is another fund that will roll back into the general fund when we come back to you for the tentative budget so that we can consolidate the funds. Everything within that fund is general fund related, so that fund will be closed out. And then you also have the loan pool fund where the general fund has put in money in order to make internal loans to other funds. So again, that would be one of the funds that once we are able to close out the CRA debt service, we'll be able to close that fund as well. So let's look, with everything that's going on, as y'all might have seen in the paper last week, the county has released their projected millage rates pretty much across the board. The taxing authorities are going to roll back. The school board is looking at not going all the way to rollback, but going less. We as Port Orange, we have to go up. We just don't have, the same, taxable value, the new growth that the county does to be able to, show a rollback. But I just want to point out that if you look at the budget document, even though the county might be going to rollback, they're in no way, shape, or form reducing their budget. Their taxes, even at rollback, is going from this year $221 million to $227 million. They're relying heavier on fund balance, so their general fund is going from $349 million to $376 million. So even at rollback,
They're spending $21 million more.
they're still spending more money than they did in the current year. Again, that's just by sheer economies of scale. They have a lot more unincorporated areas that are, much higher growth rates than we are. So if I go in and I look at an individual's tax bill right here within, city of Port Orange, they've lived in that house for close to 20 years at the 3%. Then their tax bill for this year was $2,443, assuming a 5% reduction because they paid it early. This year they're looking at a tax bill based on everything from the county, the school board, and the city. that they're looking that their increase would be $18.97. That's based on the preliminary millage rates of all taxing authorities, assuming that all the taxing authorities, set the maximum millage that they put in the budget. And again, I just want to point out, this is the staff required millage. I'm not making a statement that the budget's set at 4.92. That's what I've balanced the budget currently at. So that's why I've stated there the 4.92. Oh, something else that I just always want to point out is if you look at the tax bill, even though Port Orange, we only were worried about the city of Port Orange, but just between the school board and the county, they're over 67% of the overall tax bill an individual pays. So your city of Port Orange here is just a small portion of the overall tax bill. So investment in capital, I won't go into too much detail on this, Mayor, unless you would like for me to. This is all within the CIP. We've covered this throughout all of our budget workshops. I want to point out that everything within the general fund that you see here is not a penny of it as a transfer from the general fund. This is all from other financing sources, whether it's a grant, impact fees, or somewhere else. It is not, we're on capital outlay, not CIP. So these are the only capital outlay requests that are coming in there funded for next year, $412,000. On the Y, Fund 106, we're looking at $24,000. In the golf course, $125,000. And if you look at the fees required, 100% of that is a transfer from the general fund. So from the fees generated from the YMCA, they're not able to pay for these capital outlay items, so that is paid for by the general fund.
And just for those watching and listening at home, the YMCA pays rent on their facility, and what we do with that rent, people say, well, the city's spending money to maintain it. We estimate over the course of time what we need to maintain it. We're not trying to make a profit off the Y, but at the same time, we're not subsidizing the Y either. So even though you see city dollars being spent to maintain the Y, those city dollars are actually dollars that the Y pays in rent. We are not subsidizing the Y in the way that people think that we are. That's not what's happening. We just have a good partnership.
So then we look at our vehicles. We have quite a few vehicles within your city fleet. So when we look at the overall fleet replacement, of over close to 300 vehicles, we took a look at with your fleet maintenance supervisor, your city manager, and assistant finance director. We kind of took a look at this, and then in speaking with your FA, Toby, we just kind of looked at what the current availability of funding in your lease replacement fund, and we had to make the suggestion that it is more wise to consider a master capital lease financing for all the vehicles over $100,000. So anything that has the asterisk is over $100,000, especially looking at the fire engine, because right now we're estimating $900,000 to replace that, and that's a 12 to 18 month window for that once the order is placed till it's received. Even when we look at your lease replacement fund, we have to charge a reasonable interest rate. Florida Prime is the interest rate that we typically set the standard at. So even if we go out on a capital lease, in the last few years when I've looked at this, we've been able to come at, even if it was Truist, Wells Fargo, one of those banks, we come pretty close to the same interest rate that Florida Prime would charge. Therefore, that would be the rate that we would charge an internal loan on ourselves.
John, is that also correct? This is a point in time look at the fleet. Also, just to give you guys credit for the amount of effort you did to be efficient with this, you and the fleet manager, the guys in Public Works, sat down and looked through all the vehicles to make sure that we were efficiently replacing them when they needed to be replaced. Certain vehicles that didn't have the correct number, didn't have additional miles, they may have added life to. So what this is what we were left with. These are legitimate vehicles that need to be replaced to have our employees safe on the road. They have already gone in and vetted out what could last a little longer, what cannot, and how to. And what he's also shown you the capital lease is a more efficient way to fund them, so you're not spending as much money over time. So this is both what's left that's really needed, and it's also the most efficient way you can come up with to fund it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So even if we do the internal loan, I have to take available resources from whether it's the general fund, 401, and basically we're borrowing money from ourselves. So that just means that, you know, if we talk about our required reserves, if we say our required reserves are 30%, but we've, you know, we had 35%, but 5% of it we've done a loan, and we've only got 30% left. That just reduces the availability of reserves of the city. So instead of the city holding the note, we've got a bank holding the note for that. And yes, sir, if a vehicle was 10 years old, but it only had 20,000 miles on it, and it had little to no maintenance cost to us, we absolutely pushed it off another year. Okay.
Is this an area here, is this an example of an area where other municipalities and maybe even the county are spending their reserve dollars to avoid those kind of outlays coming out of their?
Every
General
city
fund.
does it differently.
I mean, because theoretically, I mean, I know that, I guess that would be, in my mind, when we talk about reoccurring expenses, I know those are reoccurring, but they're not like a personnel is. And I just wonder if that's where some of that's coming from.
I have never used reserves to purchase a vehicle. Yeah. My counterpart right there, retired, he as well shook his head no.
That's why we have the vehicle fund there that takes care of most of it, most of the time.
Yep. To me, a vehicle is a recurring expense, not a
Yeah.
one-time. So I have typically only used reserves to, plug a gap because I didn't have enough revenue coming in, or it was a one-time expense that would never be done again. And a vehicle is not one of them.
I have a question about one of the capital outlays. Information technology, PortNet 2023. I saw that, and I saw that somewhere else, and I was just kind of curious what that was. Is that software?
Where you at?
Is that the ARPA software?
No, sir.
Capital outlay fleet equipment.
No, fleet.
You got 3 entries for information technology. The
Yep.
last one, PortNet 2023.
We'll provide that to you,
Where you
sir.
at, Mayor?
Yep.
Page
It's in the-
26.
Yep, it's on page 26 right here.
Got it, okay.
Yep. So we can provide that detail of what exactly that is.
And the reason why I was curious is if it was software, I kind of understand that, but if that's a licensing agreement, I would, does that really belong in capital outlay? So,
We wholeheartedly agree with you. Your new budget staff has looked at everything historically on how we've done it. Might not be how we would do it, and as you know, we've been making changes as we go forward.
okay.
So, but again, this would still be something, even if it's, I'll give you computers. I need to buy $300,000 worth of computers, giving an example. Most computers today you can get between $500 and $700. It is not, by our policy, a capital outlay. However, it looks better when I present it in the budget to show it as a capital outlay, because, versus, putting a $200,000 as an operational expense, it looks better on the budget being a capital expense. But then at the end of the year, when we go to close out the books, it's reclassified as capital to an operational expense, but it's just how it's shown on the books.
Okay.
So in this case, it's over $3,500, so it would technically qualify as a capital outlay.
Okay.
Okay. Then we get into our capital improvement plan. These are all the items over the next few pages that we've talked about over the last few workshops. It's within the CIP. The only thing that we've done different in here versus what might have been showed previously, anywhere that when we had our last workshop back in June where we talked about the usage of the ARPA funds, we made sure that looking at the Town West Boulevard, that we've actually put there in parentheses the ARPA. Those are definitely projects unless something changes between now and September 21st. once the budget is adopted, we've, got to work quickly to get these things shovel ready so that we can spend the money in compliance with the U.S. Treasury. So then I just, again, Mayor, unless you want me to go through all of these, I just wanted to go right to this slide, just reiterating, as a city with 29,000 utility customers, 69,000 residents as a whole, the city of Port Orange debt capacity would be, under a benchmark city of like size utility customers and citizens. So with that, because there's so many projects that we have that are predicated on potential new debt issuance, this is all the projects and or vehicle replacement that we've built into this budget that's predicated on a debt issuance. You're, like I've said already a couple of times, your financial advisor and underwriter will be presenting to you next Tuesday their thoughts on based on information received from your directors when these projects might actually go out to start. Would we issue the debt October 1st, or would you issue it 3 months after you've signed the contract? So they're going to cover when's the best time to issue the debt. They're also going to discuss with you the various types of debt. Should it be a bank loan? Should it be bonded debt? Should you be issuing it, a bank loan right now with a 5-year call provision, so at the end of 5 years you refinance it as bonded debt? They're going to go through all of that for you. They're also going to talk to you about the reasons to go to a capital lease for the fleet replacement. So they're going to cover all of that for you before you make your final decision on whether or not to issue debt or ask the city manager and I to come back to a different financing option.
So I need to remember to bring my Tylenol for that meeting, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
'Cause our heads will hurt after going through all that.
Yep. So then our next step, it's hard to believe, we've been through the budget process now going on 5 months, so we're almost done, Mayor. I promise you. August 30th, we have the workshop to discuss your direct and indirect cost update by Rafa Tillis. Next Tuesday night, you're setting your maximum millage. And then Wednesday, September 7th and Wednesday, September 21st, you have special council meetings to consider your tentative and your final budget. Again, we have the couple of questions that you've asked us to provide research. We'll get that to you hopefully first thing by midday tomorrow. And if there's any other information, Mayor, that you would like for me to cover on this, I'll be more than happy to do so.
Actually, I think there are some miscellaneous things that we all probably have, and I've got a couple, but why don't we start? Reed, have you got anything based on any, or questions based on what we got right now, or are you just ready to absorb it? And
So this is proposed at 4.92. What is that above rollback, percentage-wise?
10.3, sorry, 4.92, 10.38.
10.38 above rollback percentage. And we all know the CPI is 9.1.
it's a good thing we don't buy groceries.
Oh man.
Shake my head.
Yeah, I think that was the only question I didn't have answered in the presentation. I may have some that I'll send over via email or something, but I think I'm good for right now.
Chase?
No questions.
Yeah. That was the question I had. Well, one of them, but Scott, what have you got for right now?
I don't have any questions for John.
Okay.
Great presentation, though.
Yeah,
you.
good job.
Appreciate the clarity.
So like I said, we'll be pushing out the budget document for your review no later than August 12th. If there's anything that comes up from when I push that out that you would like to discuss at the August 30th workshop, as I've said to the city manager, between August 30th and September 7th, I can definitely make any necessary changes that might come out. The other thing I just want to point out is that when we're doing everything through September 7th, that's new money. So that's only monies based on new revenue sources. When we come back to you on September 21st, that'll be the new money plus any projected carry forward. So, right now, if we're saying, the general fund is, make sure I don't misspeak, $47.9 million. September 21st, we might come back and say it's $50 million, but that's money that we're carrying over from the current year to next year for a project that might be ongoing. So that's why I just want to make sure. New money versus old money.
Wayne, I do have a kind of a philosophical question for us to talk about a little bit. What have we been doing for grants? Have you got a grants person, or have we been outsourcing that, or how have we been doing that?
We ran through approximate 2 different advertisements to find somebody, and couldn't find somebody that was willing to do it at a rate we had advertised. So we were using our consultant who had been helping us in the interim right now, and we're testing that for about a year. So we're going to let her run a contract through a full season. So far it's been working pretty well because she spent quality time, both fire and police department. She's coming up with more grants than we had on our typical list. So we kind of talked about that if you can't find somebody that will work full time, at least get somebody doing it. And so that's the path we're on right now.
And of course, my concern is that I've seen this on a couple of nonprofit boards that I serve on, and I've seen it here where we've outsourced it. It's like they do what they ask, but when we have somebody in-house, provided you have the right person, not only do they do what they ask, they're asked of, they also will go and pursue other grant opportunities that we're unaware of. And that's something Amanda Lasecki did when she was here. We've had people that have been so-so at it. We've had people that have been great at it. But I would certainly be interested to see the result of what we've done at the end of the year when the contract runs, and compare that to the last 2 or 3 years total funds, and then by department. And of course what it cost us versus having somebody on staff doing that. But it's kind of the difference between an order taker and an order getter. An order taker works the counter and waits for you to come and place the order. We tell them what to do, they go get it. An order getter is like a salesperson that goes out and hustles and finds prospects and adds to their own business. And that's what I hope that we'd be looking for in whoever does grants for us, is looking for opportunities that we're unaware of because of the network that they have and what they can bring to the table.
That's what we've seen in the short time that we've been under this contract. One of the things I can also offer is, so you've heard we've hired a new deputy city manager who will be here. Katrina will be here on August 1. One of her current skills, she's been a city manager in a couple other places before, but where she's currently now, she's at a nonprofit in Virginia, and she's responsible for fundraising. So she's got a tremendous amount of experience at going out and finding money from other sources. So one of the things that she'll do is assist John with making sure that the grant people, whether it's a contract or a permanent employee, are out there being order getters.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It can't be just one person's job anyway. Somebody who's in a respective department, respective area, will hear in their field of work, field of service, about certain opportunities that a generalist might not. So it's not just one person's responsibility alone, but rather the team's responsibility, and you got the captain of the team.
And just as a good example, the departments are helping, because I believe it was one of the firefighters that came up with the idea, the grant that cleans the equipment, and so they brought it forward, brought it to her, came to me. There's no match required, so we were able to go down the path. But it's the people working together. So by the time they got it to me, they'd already vetted through all the background on it, and it was not something we had done before. So fire and police are doing that because they do a lot of that, and then the other departments, she's starting to work through. Councilman Steltner and I had, Vice Mayor and I had conversations about fine grants and other things that help with the water ferries. We're looking at multiple grants right now. So in the early stages, what we've seen is exactly what you were saying. Go out and find stuff. Don't just do the same 3 or 4 we've done every year.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about basically, is either we're talking about service enhancements, improvements, or we're able to defer the cost that we directly end up passing on to the taxpayer. So those are the opportunities that I'm hoping that we're looking for.
And city managers, so everyone's aware, our grant person is actually on site tomorrow helping us with reporting requirements. So she's definitely engaged with us. There's not, at least every other week goes by, she's not sending an email to one of your directors with a grant opportunity. So she's definitely on top of everything.
Okay.
And we as your finance staff are very appreciative of her.
Council, got anything else that you want to discuss or bring up?
Yeah, I mean, just general comments for Wayne. I guess I didn't really have anything for John, but my feeling is would be that I know that the staff has done a lot of work working on a budget and working on trying to get us into the next year, but I think we've still got a long way to go. I don't see a 4.92 millage rate getting set. So I think they need to continue to do that because we've got a little bit of time before we get here to August 2nd, but not a lot. And I think that that's a reach that's probably not going to be attainable with the council. I also think that, Councilman Tremont brings up some good points. Council needs to know what do service cuts look like. I think I've got an idea, but collectively, I think we need to know. If we decide to go to rollback or go to a significant rollback rate, what are those first things? What do they look like? What exactly is that going to mean? We need to see that and know that. So I would encourage you and your staff to be able to provide that to us. We need to know what that's going to look like, not just a rhetoric talk of cutting services. So it's probably an ugly thing to look at, right? But we need to know what that is. We need to see that. So, it's a extremely tough time for a city like ours because we don't have a ton of commercial development. We don't have a lot of commercial development growth, and that's typically where big revenue comes in. Almost a lot of our stuff is always residential. It probably always will be. So even trying to keep pace with other municipalities, even in our own region, that have a lot more commercial growth because they're designed by that. Not that I want to be designed by that, but they are, or they also complement with a much higher value base in their coastal communities, beachfront communities, things like that. That we don't have that. So I think that's really important to remember. And then the other thing are the voter mandates. We are still, and we will be for the next few years, dealing with voter mandates to increase salaries, and also on top of that, competitive market mandates to increase those things. So this is not easy stuff, and it's not one-dimensional. There's, one thing is definitely going to impact another, and I get that it's complex, but it's our job to squeeze as much as we can out, so to speak. So it's just my general thoughts that I think this is a great presentation. It's always good information. It's always good for me to be able to see this stuff and then get a little bit of time to digest it. But I just don't see us going to a 4.92 millage rate.
You get the same sticker shock the rest of us got?
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah. And there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, we just all watched the last 4 or 5 months of gas price increases in general, and everybody is just looking at that going, where does that end? What does that look like? And now you start to see it fall back a little bit, but I, for one, don't have the confidence that it'll stay back. I don't know that it's going to fall back. How far will it fall back? How long will that last?
Yep.
I mean, we've all got our opinions and all that kind of stuff, but so that's a very tough thing when we know that just like that one particular element for our city operations, we can't run our city without using fuel.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So, we can look at ways to try to conserve gas, not letting vehicles run idle, different things like that. And some of our vehicles can do that and others can't do that. So there's just a lot of variables, and that's just one little thing. And every one of those adds on to something else. If we're not operating vehicles efficiently, if we're not doing those things, then we can't get to the service point to provide the actual service and do whatever that may be. So a lot of complexities, a lot of variables.
I don't know about you, but I filled up my tank today, and I paid $3.64 a gallon, and I started thinking to myself, when did I start thinking of $3.64 a gallon as cheap gas?
Could
What
I
a
ask
wild
a
time
question
we are
for
in.
Yeah, I
clarity?
definitely-
That is on the So the draft package for the second has already gone out, and we
Yeah.
have like 2 days to get the final package out to you on max millage. Is the comment on 492 related to the setting the max millage, or is it adopted millage in September? Or we can do whatever your direction is to set the max millage. We probably can't get the actual budget balance by Thursday at something lower than 492. We can do it over the course. I just wanted to know if the statement is we shouldn't even talk about a 492 max millage, or is that a statement related to where we're going to be in September? So, because what will probably happen is you'll set a max millage, and we'll just have to figure out how to get to that number or lower based on
Yeah.
that.
Or lower?
I'm assuming.
Or
Yeah,
lower.
and I can appreciate
Lower-
that, Wayne. And-
This happens every year. We set a max millage and then we sharpen our pencils and we end up with the or lower.
But if you set it some number lower, we won't know exactly how we're going to get there yet next Tuesday. So we can do whatever your direction is. We just it'll take a little longer than to get to that number.
Yeah, and to be clear, none of us know exactly what the number will be next Tuesday. I'm just sharing with you that I know that, there's a lot of time and energy for our staff
Yep.
to work on a budget. For me, I'm only one of 5 up here, but I don't want you or your staff thinking that 4.92 is my starting spot, because I'm not there. I'm not going to be there next Tuesday. So,
And then on the
they're going to need to
service,
continue to work on that.
on the service cuts, is there any parameters you want on them, or because I can just go to every department and ask them to start pulling back and putting costs to it so that you have all the options out there. So I can do that broadly across the board, or I can target it more if you have anything you'd rather anything you don't want me to touch at all, just to be sure I don't spend any time on that, or just have everybody take a look at what we can do to at least, and I get what you're saying, the exercise is, here are the options, this is what they save. Then you can pull off of a price instead of off of a concept. But I just I don't want to bring things back
no.
that are not touchable, or I don't want to miss something that's really important to you.
For me, I would ask that of every department. Whether or not that's where we get, that's the kind of forensic look I want every single department to take a look at and be able to come up with those, I guess, for lack of a better word, those items or hierarchy of, then this is where we're going to be starting. This is where it's going to come out of.
In August,
I think all of our departments can prioritize the most critical things that they do, right? I mean, certainly they can do that. The police department, for example, I would never support laying off or reducing our staffing level for our sworn officer positions. That's a non-starter for me, but there are probably things within the department and other services they provide that we need to look at. So, I mean, every single department, whether that's Parks and Rec, Public Works, Public Utilities, Fire, Police, City Hall, Finance, all of them have other services of different levels of urgency and priority, and they know what those are, and we probably know a lot of them, but until we see them and be able to vet them and value them ourselves in the event that we're going to go that direction, it would be nice to have some starting point. You know what I mean?
it's likely some of them will come back with a reduction in staff, but
Sure, I get
just
that.
making sure
And-
that's.
And if that's the case, what did that staff, each one of those lines,
What does that impact for
what do they
us?
do? What does that impact? What service does that change? And that's what we'll need to know.
And the August 30 workshop that we were going to do the feast, that's probably too far down the line to have this conversation. So after we finish Tuesday night, we'll probably come back to you and ask, would you like to have another workshop in the middle sometime in August? Because I think if we wait till August 30 to do this, that puts us real tight on voting on the budget. And if there are going to be things that are reductions in service, they're going to need some time to prepare their operations to account for that. And August 30 to September is a real tight fit to do any kind of reduction.
Sure.
So we'll probably ask you if it's okay to do a workshop sometime within a couple weeks of the second.
If we're gonna make those, the buck stops with us. We've got, if those are policy changes, we need to be the ones to make those decisions. Me personally, I'm not Mr. City Manager, you go find the money, because that's easy for me to do. And then when things go wrong, oh, it's the city manager that did it. No, if we're going to continue a program, or we're gonna continue something, that's on us. If we're gonna discontinue it and save the money from that, that's on us as well. But that's what we're tasked to do by the taxpayers, and I do not want to punt that responsibility to somebody else. That's our responsibility. But at the same time, what Scott's asking is for your help so that we can explore that.
And I understand, because there's a conceptual discussion and there's a factual discussion based on what it really means to the village, and I understand that,
And this is very early conceptual.
and I do think, because there's gonna be some ripples for morale, the conversation for the staff, and I appreciate the mayor's comments on the pie chart that showed, what we spend per capita compared to the other cities, and to the credit of the people that we have, the 500 men and women that work for us right now, they have done an outstanding job of providing the efficiencies that we already have, that having a lower tax base and having less to pull from, they're still finding a way to create positive services to this community at less cost than most everybody else does. So I don't want them to think they're not appreciated for what they're doing already.
If I
ahead.
could just, and I appreciate you mentioning that as well, and I think, it's an important note, at least I want to hear from me, is that, none of our comments are ever an indictment of staff, anything of that nature. I think, and I think we make it pretty clear throughout the year that we have the most incredible staff from the top down. It's this is hands down the most challenging and difficult part of this job right here. It's not easy to say yes to tax increases. It's not easy to say no. It's not easy to tell people and force people to pay more money every year. And it's not easy to say no to the professionals when they're asking for more money to do their job. So this is, but when I look at, almost 2.8 million is needed to just do what we did last year, that's just not sustainable year in and year out. We're, again, as we talked earlier, we're running out of places to build. At some point, we're not going to have any new revenue from new growth going in. So how are we going to continue this cycle? So that's the challenge, and I've never would question anybody up here, nor have I ever questioned anyone's motives or anyone's mindset going in. I think everybody on this dais goes in with the right attitude and the right mindset to do what the voters told us to do.
And I think we also have to keep in mind who's actually paying these increases. We saw a chart showing how many homesteaded properties we have in Port Orange, and of the cities we were compared to in Volusia County, it was by far the highest. Those people are capped because of a Save Our Homes exemption. That's what a homestead property means. They're not going to, the worst they're going to get zapped with is 2.8%. So when we're talking about a 10% tax increase, you know who's paying that? Our businesses, our non-exempt properties. Most of our residents will chip in a little bit, but I tell you what, I am not unaware of the heavy impact it has on our businesses, because right now they carry a very large share. One of the reasons why we have one of the lowest millage rates in Volusia County is because of we have a good, solid, wonderful business base, and it's a reason why I'm very supportive of business in Port Orange, because they help keep Port Orange affordable from a tax standpoint for our residents. So we need to remember who it is, who it is we're really socking it to. Just throwing that out there, food for thought. Anything else? Anyone here care to speak to the item? She's sitting back there quietly, so that's a no. Okay. With that, any other business come before us this evening? All right, let's do it again next week. Have a good night, everybody.